Welcome to the Prison Professors Podcast. We serve people who face challenges with prosecution, sentencing, and prison. My co-founders are Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny. My name is Michael Santos. We create digital content and our team offers individual consulting services. We also assist agencies that want to improve outcomes. To learn how we can help you, text the word Prison Pro to 44222. Again, text Prison Pro to 44222 and get our free brochure. You can also visit us at prisonprofessors.com or contact Justin at 818-424-2220. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Send confirmation that you reviewed our podcast and we'll send you a free digital book. Stay tuned for a 20 to 30-minute episode of Prison Professors. Welcome to Prison Professors. I am Michael Santos, and I'm excited today to speak with John Webster. John is the founder of National Prison and Sentencing Consultants, and he is somebody who knows quite a bit about being a prison and sentencing consultant because he was once a criminal defense attorney, and he also faced some time inside the criminal justice system himself. So, John, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about your background, the type of career that you led prior to going into the criminal justice system?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Michael, and it's nice to speak with you and your audience. Well, I graduated law school in 1984, and I began my practice working for a very large New York law firm, which is what everybody wanted to do when they were in law school. And I ultimately, for personal reasons, moved to Rhode Island. And again, joined once again, a very old, white shoe, very large law firm. And sometime after about 12, 13, 14 years of practice, I discovered that I fell in love doing criminal defense work as opposed to much of the environmental litigation, business litigation that we were doing. And I was ultimately made a partner at that firm, but my true love was in criminal defense work, which was very inconsistent with the business plan of a large law firm. So after much thought, consternation, I did decide to walk that plank, and I left that firm and started my own doing primarily federal criminal defense work. And in 1999, I was indicted by the federal government for lying at a meeting on behalf of a client. Very interesting, but my client was wearing a wire in meetings with me. I guess in an effort to save himself. Be that as it may, I did, in fact, plead guilty because I was guilty. I wasn't pressured into it. I made a mistake. So at any rate, I knew I was going to prison. I ultimately got sentenced to 13 months. I knew I would lose my license for a certain period of time. In Rhode Island, I would have had to wait 2 years and before I get my license back. And well, while in prison, many people knew I was a lawyer, and that certainly didn't hide it. Many people asked for help on different things, and I certainly couldn't practice law, but I can certainly help out a cellmate or a friend or an acquaintance. And I started to realize that there were so many of my fellow inmates had left a lot of time on the table. This is even pre-Booker. I was in prison in 2001, 2002 period of time, and I couldn't believe the type of work their lawyers were putting out for them, leaving many points on the table. And as you know as well as I do, back when I was sentenced, the guidelines were mandatory. So it was clearly very, very important to make sure you properly establish the guideline level. And you understand the complexities of 2255s and various petitions to try to amend sentences and the problems with that. But I was truly appalled that I knew one guy who was probably over-sentenced by 5 or 6 years just by mistakes, okay? And so I was helping people in prison, of course, for no fee. And when I came out, I had every intention of going back to the practice of law after 2 years, and I started this company in an effort to give me something to do and some income in those 2 years, and certainly something to do. And I thought long and hard about what kind of company I wanted to run, and hence the name National Prison and Sentencing Consultants. I was going to focus on prison-based issues, whether it be ways to shorten time or make time more productive for a client, hopefully try to teach them or make them known or make it known to them that various types of programs and employment modalities they can use in prison to try to come out what I always refer to as a bigger, better, stronger person. For instance, if you've got a young man with no skills, nominal education. You certainly, and the Bureau will, as you know, will make them do it, get their GED. But, I would try to get them into a Unicor-based prison if possible, so they can learn a skill or a trade. A 65-year-old man doing a skid bid, 12 months. You tried to get him in a place that was just convenient to him and his family, a warehouse, a place like the camp in Devens. So I was doing a lot of prison-based work, but, I didn't get a lobotomy when I lost my license, so I still have a certain skill set in application of the guidelines. And so I started to market myself as a sentencing and mitigation consultant. Many people call me a sentencing and mitigation expert. I don't like to use that term because you're only an expert if someone says you are. And some people have said that, but I do view myself as a sentencing and mitigation consultant in an effort to assist lawyers and their clients establish the proper guideline level, because there was just way too many mistakes when it came to stacking. Gun charges associated with drug cases where those, 5-year mandatories got to get stacked onto it. Many lawyers just didn't even know this, and their clients were doing, more time or were quite often worse. A lawyer would tell their client that, well, you're looking at 33 to 41 months. And I'd look at the plea and I'd say, brother, you're looking at 7 to 8 years, man. Your lawyer didn't tell you this accurately. So that's how my business developed. Well, lo and behold.
Before we go more into the business, if we could, John, tell us a little bit more about you going into the system. And I want to get to the business, but first of all, I think there's going to be a lot of listeners who are going to be curious about what is different from a person who practiced as a professional criminal defense attorney, suddenly finds himself the target of an investigation and having to go through the same types of scrutiny of a pre-sentence investigation report, determining whether you're going to plead guilty or go to trial. How did you, first of all, encounter that problem, and how did you respond to it?
Well, to be honest with you, I did hire and I retained very good lawyers, very competent lawyers to work with me. And at the very beginning, I told them, guys.
But how did you learn that you were a target?
Oh, the AP called me.
The AP?
Yeah, Associated Press. They called my office to ask if they can talk to me about my indictment. I didn't know I was under investigation. I didn't know I was going to get indicted. That's how I found out. My secretary called me and said, the AP would like to talk to you about your indictment.
So the government did not do one of those coming to your office and arresting you. You were notified by a reporter that you were indicted.
That's correct.
Why do you suppose that was for you that they didn't do that?
They never let me know I was a target. They wanted to know what happened with respect to these various meetings. And, they ended up charging me with a 1001 violation. But I had only met with the FBI once before, and I was led to believe it was regarding whether it be my client or someone associated with my client. So we had tricky issues with the privilege. Little did I know the privilege was all waived because my client was cooperating. But that's how I found out about it.
So you found out about it, you hired counsel, and then the proceedings that followed for you, walk us through those initial proceedings that you experienced before you went to prison.
Sure. Well, I was not physically arrested in the sense that I contacted attorney, who in turn contacted the prosecutor and said, look, when you want to arraign him, just give us a date and he'll come down. And I did. I was in Rhode Island. The case was in New Jersey. Came down. Of course, you plead not guilty no matter what. I met with counsel, and explained to him, look, I am in fact guilty of this. Unless you can come up with some miraculous way to suppress or whatever, but, I don't think there's a defense here. I wasn't acting as my own lawyer. I certainly wanted other opinions, but, the fact remains the core of the indictment was in fact true. So, I didn't have much hope of, having the ability to go to a trial and be successful, or to have, through legal maneuvering, the indictment ultimately dismissed. That just wasn't going to happen in my case.
How long were the proceedings before the time you were notified that you were indicted and the time that you surrendered to prison?
About 10 months.
And during those 10 months, were you able to do the type of maneuvering that you're describing that you now help other clients with, such as get to the appropriate prison that you wanted to go to and adjust in such a way that would have resulted in the best possible outcome for yourself?
Absolutely not. And that was one of the problems. Where I guess, the kernel of this business that I currently run began to develop, because there was really nobody. My lawyers knew nothing about prisons. They knew nothing about security classifications, designation. They just knew nothing about it. And I was able to contact an old law school buddy of mine who I knew had gone to federal prison a few years back. And he spent about an hour on the phone with me. But that was really it. There was really nobody professional out there like yourself where I can call up and either talk to or retain to assist me and give me all the information that I need to be able to, I don't want to call it survive federal prison, but make the best out of that experience and try to grow and to move forward, which is really what I try to do here.
So as a result of you not having that type of insight from your attorney, help our audience understand what you learned. What did they do? Where did you go to prison? And what was it like for you those first days and weeks inside, not knowing what was coming?
Sure. Fear really wasn't a big factor in my life. I grew up in the Bronx. I'm going to say I'm a tough guy, but I can certainly handle myself. I'm a good judge of character, kind of know who to stay away from, who not to, just by kind of instinct. But the recurring theme that went through my head probably 10 times a day for the first couple of months is, what the heck are you doing in here? How did you get here? And it was, to me, it was almost mind-boggling that I had somehow managed to find myself, sitting on the other side of the table at the court, and then ultimately ending up going to prison. Certainly there were some scary moments. I had a little bit of diesel therapy for reasons that are still unclear to me, but they decided they liked me better on a bus. So I did get to go to some places that were, quite
Tell
shocking.
us where you went.
I was placed in a county prison in New Jersey for about a month. From there, I went up to Otisville, and I was held there. It was in transit, so I was held in their shoe. Then I went up to Raybrook, and I was held there in their shoe for about MDC Brooklyn. I was there for about a month as well. And then I was in Raybrook for a couple of 3 weeks. And then I was ultimately placed in the camp in Fort Devens. But I was on the road for just about 3 months.
So if you were the consultant to an individual that had the same experience as you, that he was a professional, was indicted, what steps would you take to minimize the possibility that individual is going to go through that type of challenging diesel therapy, as you called it?
Sure. I did have a self-surrender date on that, but obviously what I'm going to teach my clients is, first of all, certainly respect your bond conditions and your release conditions. At this point, you don't want to have any challenges to your diesel therapy, to your self-surrender date, where you're going to get held and bust around. I worked with my clients early on about the importance of a self-surrender, if at all possible. Sometimes people are held and self-surrender is not an option. I do teach them, if they are being held, exactly what diesel therapy is. I do try to work with the DSCC, the Designation and Sentence Computation Center, that after sentencing to get these people designated as quickly as possible so they can have hopefully a more direct route to their ultimate facility. I do prepare them that diesel therapy is very different, especially when you're in an administrative facility like where I was for a little bit, MDC Brooklyn. You've got a lot of people in that facility, who just came in off the street, and you're all housed together. They don't know what's going on in their life. They don't know who's cooperating against them, if they're going to plead guilty. Some of them are still kicking drugs. And it's very different from when you're in a straight up prison, where I've always found the tension level and the atmosphere to be significantly more relaxed, because people aren't under those same stress, meaning they know where they live. They know where their out date is, give or take a few months. The battle's over. So, the tension level, my experience has been in Brooklyn, is very, very high. I mean, it was really no different from a county jail in that sense, obviously federal inmates. And so I do explain to them the types of people that you're ultimately going to meet in an administrative facility, and the importance of, learning to stay on the radar, because all you want to do is bide your time at that point and ultimately get to your designated facility, and preferably a decent one, and preferably a minimum security facility, which you and I both know are considered camps.
Mm-hmm. And so when you got to the camp, what was your experience there? What was your day-to-day life like?
Well, first of all, when I finally got to a camp, I almost felt like I'm free. I had about 7 more months to do, somewhere in that range, without counting halfway house time. And I was like, hey, compared to where I'd been, this is great. There's not going to be any problems. And there wasn't.
But you were not authorized to surrender to a camp yourself. Is that right? They took you into custody? Is that why you were in transit?
I was, but I ended up getting arrested while I was waiting for the designation. I ended up getting arrested on some nonsensical charge, but which a state thing. It had to do with an argument with the neighbor. And the cops came, and I wasn't very tolerant, so they ultimately arrested me. And then, of course, that's a violation. So they held me, even though they dismissed those charges, the state charges. They were going to ship me down to New Jersey to have a violation hearing. And I said, guys, let's waive all that. Just get me into prison now. It was 2 weeks early. My lawyer worked that out. But being bounced around to all those places, and going through that legal proceeding, it took a couple of months.
Good data point. That's one of the reasons that you were likely put on a bus going around the country before you got to your ultimate destination.
That's right.
But you rebounded quite well. So you get out of prison after 6 months, or a total of about a year, and you resume your life in this new role of helping other people make better decisions when they're going in. Walk us through some of the best practices for positioning themselves for the best possible outcome. What have you found works in your practice?
First of all, I ask my clients to begin to recognize some form of culpability. Now, please understand, Michael, and people don't come to me when they are still fighting the charges in terms of culpability. If someone believes that they're innocent, or they believe that the government can't prove their charges, people don't come to me for that, because that's certainly not what I do. And so I either get involved when someone's anticipating pleading guilty, or they were found guilty after a trial. So one of the things I try to get their head around is we have to accept some form of culpability. You have to accept it. You have to recognize that somewhere, somehow, and for some reason, what you did was wrong. Maybe not wrong in the sense of everything the government says you did, because we all know what indictments look like and we all know what allegations look like. But, you made a mistake somewhere. So let's try to figure out how you got there. How did you get to my office? Once we begin to work with that, I begin to prepare my client if I'm doing just pure prison preparation, okay? I demystify prison for them. I make it very clear to them, and as well as I do, except for a few surprises, most of your nonviolent white-collar offenders are going to end up in a federal prison camp. So I demystify it for them. I explain to them everything that they've ever, seen on TV about prisons. It's not going to happen to them. They're not going to be raped, abused. As the Aryan Brotherhood is not going to ask them to come over and join a gang, and Claude Van Damme is not going to be there and looking to have a fight with you. Okay, they're not the nicest places in the world, but you're certainly not going to be like in any prison you've seen on TV. Now, obviously, if you're going to a medium or a high, and I don't get much of that work, most of the people that retain us are not, facing a situation where they're going to end up in a USP. So that's 95% of our work is dealing with white-collar offenders looking at either a low or a camp. So getting them to accept responsibility for how they got here, to me, is very important, because my entire process is to get people to begin looking forward, not backwards. I don't want them constantly looking backwards and say, I should have done this, I should have done that. The prosecutor was out to get me. My lawyer was incompetent. The judge was a mean-spirited individual. No, that's not going to help anybody at this point. Right? You were found guilty by admitting to it or by a jury. The judge sentenced you. You can have an appeal, do what you want to do. But in the meantime, I got to get you to the next phase of your life, which is prison. So
what's the best possible outcome for those people, John? What are the best things that they can do while they are in there? Many of those white-collar offenders, and in light of fraud guidelines and the way that sentences are handed out today, might be serving much significantly longer than you. What's the best possible outcome for somebody doing 3 years, 5 years, 8 years inside of one of those minimum security camps?
Okay. I always tell people, look, your goal, if I have anything to do with it, is to come out a bigger, better, stronger person, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. That's your goal. Use this time to be a better person. Now, we start out with some basics. 40-year-old man, 50-year-old man, even myself, there were always things I wanted to learn or do, but life got in the way. All right? Just, whatever. Whether it be learning a language, what I did with my time is I learned how to build websites, which is very tricky to do when you don't have a computer. You only had books to read. And my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, would be sending in books on coding and building websites. And I spent a good part of my time learning how to do it. And the interesting part is when I got out and I had access to a computer, I built one. And it worked. It didn't do anything. Not for my business, or I just wanted to see if I can take my book knowledge and actually work with a computer and build a website that works. And I felt pretty accomplished by that. But more importantly, when it came time to having my website built and all that, I kind of knew what the experts were talking about now. I was much higher level. So I did come out to a certain extent, I took advantage of the time to learn something. So I try to teach my clients to do that. Stay busy. Okay. For many of our clients, as you know, their previous life is over in the sense of employability. So, for instance, if it's a securities fraud case, chances are they're never going to be involved in the securities fraud business again. Well, let's think about what we're going to do to become a productive, employable person when you get out. Contrary to popular belief, yes, you can get those menial labor jobs if that's what you want to do. But most of your 40-year-old, 50-year-old clients who were your type A type personalities, and built a very nice business in the securities industry or sales or whatever they did, want to go back to something. Many times they can't. Well, what is it that we're going to do? Okay, release preparation doesn't start when you hit the outdoor. It starts when you hit the indoor. When you first walk into that facility, that's when I believe release preparation starts. I don't care if you're there for 3 years, 5 years, 8 years. You will get out of prison. What are you going to do afterwards? And by the way, are you just going to sit around and watch TV? We call it, doing time with Jerry Springer. You're going to watch Jerry Springer reruns for the next 5 years? Or you're going to do something to try to improve yourself? Now, as well as I do, resources in prison can be limited. So let's work on this now and figure out what is it that you're going to do and figure out what resources you need. Many of my clients have taken advantage of my suggestion of the Ohio University's inmate education program. They offer, just like they did in the old days, because there's no internet there in facilities, an old-fashioned correspondence school. And you can take many courses. For many of my clients, even older ones, 50, 60, 70 years old, I said, but keep that mind active. Do something like this so you can stay sharp. And I honestly think when you have a busy day in prison, and Michael, I think you know how hard that can be sometimes, but to have a busy day in prison, boy, that day goes by so quick. I almost feel like you cheated the government out of a day. If, you get up, you do your work and you're typically done by 4, you eat, now you've got 6, 7 hours with nothing to do. If you use that constructively, next thing you know, it's another wake up. Then a week goes by, then a month goes by, then another year goes by. And the next thing you know, you're ready to hit the door. And that's what I teach all my clients.
Give us a case study of somebody that followed your very sage advice, and that's applicable whether somebody's going into a minimum, a low, a medium, or high, staying busy, staying productive, being goal-oriented, values-based. All of those suggestions are certainly applicable regardless of where the individual is serving his time. But give us a case study of somebody that you encountered who once had a great life prior to imprisonment and then used that very good guidance to launch a new career when they came home.
Oh, sure. And I'll even just use his first name. I don't have his permission to use his last. He's a young man out of Texas. contacted us. It's got to be 6-7 years ago, with some mitigation work. It was a drug case, and it was an analog case, by the way. And so he was importing at what were legal at a certain point, and then became illegal, but he didn't get out of the business, and so he was tagged. And I worked with Justin for quite a bit of time on not only his mitigation work and preparing him for prison. And one of the things that we talked about is what is he going to do when he gets out? And I shared with him, I said, Justin, you had all of these contacts in China where they were sending you these precursors and all of these things. So you kind of know quite a bit about international trade. Is there anything you think you would be able to do when you get out that would allow you to, run a Similitide business, but with legal products as opposed to the illegal ones that you were doing? And we gave that a lot of thought. He gave it a lot of thought, and he did quite a bit of work. Through Corlings, he emailed me on a regular basis. I know he would ask me to send in certain kinds of literature, and he asked his family to do the same. And I can tell you today, he owns about 27 vape stores throughout, Texas, even here in Tennessee. And he is doing extraordinarily well. And these vape products that he buys a lot of them overseas. He understands how to get, international import-export business from his previous drug business. And he used that to his advantage. And we've remained in close. We're Facebook friends, and I see, where he's traveling all over the world, where he's traveling, when he gets time off from his business, he in Hawaii or Las Vegas on vacations with his friends, and he's doing remarkably well. He's now living the dream. And
that is really exciting, I think, for somebody who's going in today to recognize that, current struggles does not necessarily mean the future life. There's always a pathway to a better life. And we just heard John talking about a young man who served a significant amount of time in prison, but yet rebounded successfully. And I appreciate you sharing that story. I look forward actually to meeting John Webster next month when I'll be traveling to Nashville. But I definitely want to thank you for spending this time and sharing your story with our audience. John is the founder of, it's National, repeat it for us, John.
National Prison and Sentencing Consultants.
He is a former criminal defense attorney who now works to help people who are going through the struggles of a criminal indictment and possibly preparing themselves for prison. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, if you want to know the road ahead, ask somebody who's been there and walking back. And certainly that's what John is doing. So I thank you for spending this time with our audience at Prison Professors. We try to provide this guidance to people who are locked in jails and prisons across the United States, but also to family members. So if you're looking for struggle, take a look at John Webster. He is actually a competitor of ours, but we want to profile him because we admire his work. So
We're not competitors, Michael. You and I are rowing in the same canoe, going down the same direction. All right?
Trying to help people at the biggest struggle of their life. And the reality is people need that type of guidance, and we're happy to provide it as much as we can. That's what Prison Professors program is about. And we're come to the end of this episode. John, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
No, I would just like to thank you, and anybody here who's listening to this podcast and is facing some time in federal prison. Don't go it alone. Call someone like Michael or myself, and we can guide you through the system. But there's no need to go it alone.
On behalf of my two partners, Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny, I want to thank everybody for listening. I am Michael with Prison Professors. If you'd like more information, please text the word Prison Pro to 44222 or visit us at prisonprofessors.com. We'll be back tomorrow with another inspiring guest. Thank you.